What's up, everybody? Welcome back into Shout, a Buffalo Bills football podcast. He's Ryan Talbot. I am Matt Parrino, and we are here today to talk to you about maybe the most intriguing position group for the Buffalo Bills heading into training camp, wide receiver. So much to get into for this really interesting group. What's up, Ryan?
Hey, not too much. Yeah, excited to talk about a unit that, there's a lot of uncertainty there after trading away Stephon Diggs and letting Gabe Davis walk in free agency. So one of the more interesting positional groups that we'll be monitoring this summer.
As we kind of talk about like 53-man roster projections and getting this thing down, it's really a challenge because there's so many of the same kind of player in this group, right? Like somebody that has their assets to their game, but guys that have like maybe had low end seasons or maybe not lived up to expectations elsewhere. Even a guy like Marquez Valdez-Scantling coming over for the Chiefs. I mean, 2-time Super Bowl winner over the last 2 seasons, and the Bills just kind of scooped him up late in free agency. There wasn't a huge market out there for him. So I guess like the best place to start is like establishing, all right, the big three, if you will, the starting 3 wide receivers. And I think that's probably Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, and Keon Coleman. Is that right in your mind? And why, if so?
Yeah, that's absolutely right in my mind. And I don't really see anyone else necessarily emerging to join that group. You first of all, you look at Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir is returning to this offense in which you saw his role increase in the back end of the season. He emerged as someone that Josh Allen could trust, good route runner, great hands, caught 23 of 25 targets over the last 5 games, including the 2 in the postseason, 3 final regular season games. He's someone that the Bills have a lot of faith in. They talked to him at the end of the season, probably told him, here's what you need to work on. We anticipate you taking another step in terms of being a player. He only had 8% of the targets last season, Matt, thrown his way. I expect that number to skyrocket in year 3 with no Gabe Davis, with no Stephon Diggs. He is a player that has trained with Eric Moulds the last few seasons, and you've seen it pay off in terms of the yard after catch, in terms of the ability. He's harder to bring down. He has a lot of faith in terms of catching the ball with his hands. And even when he was drafted, there was a lot of draft analysts talking about the Bills getting a real steal in round 5. As for Curtis Samuel, I can't say he's the forgotten about man in this trio, but I think a lot of Bills fans don't necessarily have enough respect on this name of a player right now at this point in time. He's never played with a good quarterback. He's played in Joe Brady's system, and he had over 1,000 total yards in that one season in 2020. Didn't have a lot of time to work with Joe Brady, as that was a COVID year. Still produced over 800 yards receiving, 200 yards rushing. Really fit well into that system. He comes to Buffalo, and he's playing with Josh Allen. That is such a major difference over the Commanders quarterbacks he's played with as of late. The quarterbacks that he saw in Carolina, the speed's still there. He's only 27 years old. He does feel like a guy that's been in this league for a long time. And then you look at the age, and he'll turn 28 later this year. But I expect high-end production there. And then Keon Coleman, they drafted him in the second round, the first pick of the second round at that, for a reason. They want that big physical presence, the guy that can make contested catches. He had to make a lot of those last year at Florida State due to inaccurate passes from Jordan Travis. And then he's someone that I don't necessarily know if we're going to get high-end production early from him, but he's going to be someone that you can factor in as a red zone weapon, someone that as the season goes on, you'll see his role grow.
Yeah, I want to pick up on Coleman there because, going back to Brady talking about him a couple weeks ago during minicamp or OTAs, he basically called himself a big fan of Keon and all the things that he can do, and the fact that he brings something to this offense that they didn't have before. And that to me is the biggest indicator of role for 2024 here, is that there's a specific plan for how they want to use Curtis Samuel. They know what they got out of Khalil Shakir and what they could do with him last year. And I'm high on Coleman's role in year 1 because, or I should say the expectations are high because of what I think they think he can do in this offense. Everybody's doing their best to kind of keep it tempered, right? The expectations, not putting too much on a rookie's plate. But at the same time, his ability to high point a ball, his ability to win those rough and rugged routes against physical cornerbacks. The Bills didn't have that before. Gabe Davis was a big physical, potentially physical player, but he didn't really utilize his physicality in the same way that a Keon Coleman will. He's much scrappier. He's much more willing to kind of get into those battles. We saw it in minicamp. Pads aren't even on yet. So I'm pretty high on where he can be. And I do think it's those three guys that I think are going to start things off. I think Marquez Valdez-Scantling can easily kind of cycle into the mix as somebody that, he's got experience before being in Green Bay, working his way up, being a guy that maybe needed to find a role as a fourth receiver, third receiver before he got a chance to be an every down kind of guy. And maybe at this point in his career, he doesn't want to be an every down kind of guy. Maybe they can utilize him in a different way than even the Chiefs did a year ago. We're going to have our show on the tight ends. We're going to talk about Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. But in terms of the wide receivers, this group, I think, starts with those big three. I think MVS is in that middle tier. And then we start to talk about the Mac Hollins of the world. How much can they get involved in the offense? Because I do think he's going to be on the final roster just from a leadership and special teams perspective. Can Chase Claypool make a run at the roster? And where do they want to sprinkle him in when he's on the field? There's tons of things you could do with him. I mean, he's a great blocker when he's willing to do it, and he can win down the field on the deep ball. And that's something that, for as much as Gabe Davis really added to the mix in that department over the last couple of years, it's been lacking. Their ability to get over the top of coverages, win down the field. I think they got some guys that could be physical down there. It starts with Keon. I think MVS brings some of that, and Claypool as well.
Yeah, so for me, I would actually have Mac Hollins slotted in as wide receiver format. And I don't know if that's a hot take or a bold take or not. I think he ends up with more receptions than an MVS. And they're both in that middle tier, though. That tier after the tier one, I agree with those two players, with then Claypool being my wide receiver 6 right now. But, first of all, with Mac Hollins, Hollins does everything that this team loves. He's a great blocker. He's a special teams guy, and he's vocal. We heard all spring about how vocal he was as a receiver. And you look at his stats last year in Atlanta, he had a down year. But again, it's the quarterback play. Atlanta was atrocious in terms of their quarterback play with Desmond Ridder and was it Taylor Heineke that was the other QB there last year, I believe. Just bad quarterback play all year long. So to expect Mac Hollins to produce in that system where a lot of their star players on offense did not produce because of the quarterback play tells you a lot. But he did produce in that secondary wide receiver, 3 wide receiver 4 type role when he was in Las Vegas. He had a great season there. He was reliable catching the ball. He brought solid depth. That's what I kind of anticipate here in Buffalo with Josh Allen throwing him the ball. MVS, the drop rate is something that you need to kind of be concerned about. It was over 7% last year in KC. But the one thing that he does really well is he stretches the field. And last year when the Bills stretched the field, whether it was Stephon Diggs or Gabe Davis, it opened up things underneath. And I think MVS can be a very valuable contributor in terms of helping open things up underneath, while the Bills can take some shots here and there to him down the field, get him some passes in the intermediate short range as well. And then that last guy that you mentioned, Chase Claypool, really like what he looked like in his first 2 seasons in the league. He almost mirrored his production in year 2 in terms of his receptions and receiving yards. He saw a big dip in touchdowns, 9 as a rookie, 2 in his sophomore season. But he's another guy. If you don't have a quarterback, you're going to struggle. Once Roethlisberger's arm went, Pittsburgh, their passing game as a whole went downhill. He gets traded to Chicago. We know that Chicago has moved on from Justin Fields now to Caleb Williams, and there was a reason for that. And then last year he was traded to Miami, but it was in October. Maybe didn't get acclimated to that offense. This is kind of that last chance for Chase Claypool. He landed in a good situation where he has a chance to make this roster, and he has an elite quarterback.
Yeah, I think of that one Ben Roethlisberger to Claypool touchdown that kind of was passed around on social media after the Bills signed Claypool. And it's like, how many of those happened in 2021? How many of them were even possible? I mean, Ben Roethlisberger at that point was noodle armed as they come. And I just don't know if he was getting the ball down the field at the same rate. And everywhere else that you've seen, I mean, Kenny Pickett was he was a mess. I mean, that
Right.
season trying to trot him out as a quarterback on top of the declining Roethlisberger the year before, it's kind of easy to kind of put, to connect the dots. And I think that that's probably what the Bills are doing with Chase Claypool is like, okay, let's get this guy some not only competent quarterback, but elite level quarterback play and see if that maybe brings back some of what he did. And he brings a specific skill set that I think, gives you some juice, but also gives you a little bit of insurance. Like, Khalil Shakir banged up a couple times over the course of his career, was banged up a little bit in the spring. If he misses any kind of time, you got to kind of give yourself some options at guys that can kind of come into the situation and find a way to make an impact. So that'd be really interesting. All right, let's get to the next question here. Actually, before we do, how about a little shout out to our insiders on the text line, 716-528-6727 or joinsubtext.com/shout Buffalo Bills. You do either of those two things, get yourself set up. You're going to be an insider with a 2-week free trial to check it out. And it's the perfect time, Ryan, because under those 2 weeks, you will experience our preview text, but then also you'll get the first couple of days of our training camp coverage, which is going to be to the walls, $3.99 a month after that. And the text line is brought to you by Carrie C. Byer, attorney with the law offices of Francis M. Litro, located at 237 Main Street in Buffalo, New York. If you or someone you know is seriously injured, give Carrie a call, 716-852-1234, or check out litrolaw.com. Now, Ryan, the summer, we're still in the middle of summer, maybe not middle of summer, but we're getting through it here. Towards the end of summer, September, season starting, final roster cut downs, maybe get up under the awning, make sure you get like any of those beehives that are sitting around, you kind of clamp onto them, rip them down, throw them in the garbage. My next question is, will the Justin Shorter hive have to be ripped down from the top of the awning and thrown into the garbage can by the time we get to the regular season? Is he going to make this roster? Does he have any chance to make a run at this roster?
He has a chance, but I'm kind of sitting here holding that off spray and spraying it at nighttime, making sure that they're not attacking me as I knock that bad boy down. I don't necessarily see it, Matt. There was a lot of hype around him last season, and I get it. High school, one of the top recruits in the nation, didn't necessarily pan out in college in his 2 stops, but he comes to the pros and he looks the part. But the Bills kind of drafted this guy more than anything else to be a special teams contributor, and work his way up on the roster. And, he suffers a hamstring injury, gets put on the IR. The Bills open his practice window in December and decide not to activate him off of it. He had a true redshirt season. But now, like you said, you look at the back end of that roster. You want guys that you can count on to produce, that have experience with production, NFL production. And that is where the Chase Claypools, the MVS, the Mac Hollins, where they earn their stripes and earn that job. If the Bills only keep 6, it's a hard path already for Justin Shorter to make this roster. They would almost have to keep 7, and he's still not a lock at that point. There are other guys that I think could make a more compelling case, but Shorter now is someone that I think you could comfortably get on your practice squad. I don't think he was necessarily get claimed elsewhere, and you try to keep to further that development. But yeah, I think that the hive gets batted down here this summer. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the first sign of trouble for the hive was, when Brandon Beane was doing the offseason circuit, and every time he was asked about the receiver position, he went out of his way to mention Tyrell Shavers, an undrafted free agent from last year's class, and no real mention of Justin Shorter. And maybe that's by design. Maybe they're looking to motivate a guy that super talented. I mean, athletic measurements are unbelievable, but after a while, like, all these years go by and you start to kind of see why maybe the athletic profile hasn't necessarily measured up against the football production profile. And that's the reason why he was available in the 5th round. That's the reason why, the Bills were, willing to redshirt. I mean, listen, he was a 5th round pick. Marquez Stevenson was a 5th round pick a couple years ago. Who else was a 5th round pick? Khalil Shakir. And he was on the field. Yeah. So, if you're good enough, you're going to find your way onto the field. Otherwise, they kind of find a way to kind of elongate the process a little bit for you. And to me, that puts Justin Shorter way behind the 8 ball. They brought in so much competition here. He's going to have to just blow these guys out of the water. And are we confident over 2.5 weeks of training camp he's going to be able to stay healthy and then produce in the preseason? I'm not there.
No, I'm not there either. And, he obviously has a very unique skill set and size to him that some of these other guys that he'll be competing with a roster spot don't. But the other guys have unique speed, like a KJ Hamler and Andy Isabella. There is a Tyrell Shavers who was mentioned, like you said, this offseason. It's not just going to get handed to him, Matt, and he's really going to have to make the most of this short time at St. John Fisher University.
I got to mention it here, and I'm going to ask another question. I was a huge fan of Brian Thompson this whole
Yeah.
spring. I mean, he made a lot of big plays. There's a reason why the Bills brought him back on a futures deal. He was kind of banged up in the offseason part last year, maybe in camp. I can't remember which part. But, man, he really showcased himself really well during the spring, during the competitive practice periods. He's somebody that I'm definitely watching. He's like rising in terms of the stock watch heading into training camp. But in terms of maybe like a Hail Mary throw, I mean, Bills fans love Andy Isabella. I mean, I'm asked about him almost as much as anybody else on the roster, pound for pound. KJ Hamler's a guy that they're taking a little bit of a flyer on here because of the juice. He's got that deep speed. Go watch some of those highlight plays he made his first 2 seasons in Denver, and it's easy to kind of get on board there. He made one of them during minicamp and really got people excited about making a big connection with Josh Allen. Is there one of those guys that you think has an outside chance at a roster spot? And is it a roster spot where you think they can make a run at the 6th spot, or would the Bills have to keep 7 for them to be in the mix?
So I think they would have to keep 7. Again, it's the
So
lack.
Hamler doesn't make the roster in any circumstance, you think, as a 6th guy, and then that eliminates a Mac Hollins, a Claypool, or MVS.
I just don't see it happening. It's one of those scenarios where you can trust the production of those players that you just mentioned over the course of their careers. Hamler is my dark horse if they keep 7, and it's the speed. It's what you saw out of him, like you said, that first year in Denver. It's what you saw from him at Penn State. But it's the injuries that scare me, Matt. And we've talked about best abilities, availability. This is a guy that has had hamstring injuries. He tore an ACL. He had a hip injury at that same time. He had a heart irritation last summer, an issue with that. So it's one thing after the other, and he just can't stay healthier on the field. So the speed is great, but if you're not going to be on the field utilizing it, it's going to be tough for him to make this roster in a real uphill battle. Now, if he looks the part these next few weeks at training camp, stays healthy, maybe it convinces the Bills to keep him as that number 7 receiver. Maybe he can sell them as a return option. But he's going to have to do just about everything right to make this roster, in my opinion.
I got some recent player comps for Mac Hollins and Andy Isabella. Let me throw these at you and see what you think. And it's not perfect because they don't play the same kind of role. Mm-hmm. But Andy Isabella, to me, is kind of like Duke Williams, right? Somebody that gets a couple cups of coffee. Fans just absolutely love him for whatever reason. He had himself a nice preseason. Duke Williams did that one year. But it's not going to materialize as any type of significant role long term. Like, there's a reason that Andy Isabella has been in this league as long as he has, and he hasn't broken through and been able to find a significant job. Hollins, to me, is like the new Jake Kumaro. And I know that probably jives with your projection for where he is, but I don't necessarily think it does, because Kumaro was always in the mix for them. Like, he was making 53-man rosters. People were cutting him during the exercise, and the Bills were keeping him and having him start and play a significant role on special teams. But that's, to me, where his role is really key, is like what I think they envisioned for him on special teams. I don't know if he'll have the kind of receiver role that I think some think that he might be able to have.
Okay. I don't hate those comparisons. I just see him as a safe bet for the roster because of the special teams ability. A great blocker, a team that, like we've talked about, they wanted to lean a little bit more on the run game. I think he can be an asset there. And there has been production with, I'm not going to say high-end quarterback play, because, he didn't have that in Las Vegas. But when he had decent quarterback play, he did produce as a receiving option. And I think he can repeat that in Buffalo.
Lawrence Keys and Xavier Johnson. I think Xavier Johnson has an outside chance to be a practice squad guy, priority practice squad guy with a really good training camp. Lawrence Keys, I think he's got an uphill battle to be in that mix because I think a guy like Brian Thompson, Justin Shorter, and Tyrell Shavers are all going to probably be commodities at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Those, the UDFA is brought in this year. That's tough. If they do enough this summer, maybe they prove that they are worthy of a practice squad spot, but no path to a roster spot for either of those players, in my opinion.
All right, that's going to do it for the wide receiver episode here. We're going position by position, day by day, all the way until the start of training camp next Wednesday. Keep it locked on a Shout at Buffalo Bills Football Podcast. August 4th, we're coming to Dorado, Park Ave in Rochester. Tail end-ish of training camp. Wingnuts is coming out. We'll do a live show. Going to be an afternoon spectacular. We cannot wait for that. For Ryan, I'm Matt. See you next time, everybody.